You probably have things lying around that look like junk. But what if I told you they're exactly what your garden needs? In this video, you won't just see beautiful garden ideas. You'll learn how everyday trash can become backyard treasure. And no, this isn't fantasy. It's real, doable, and meant for anyone, anywhere. Welcome to Arkan Aesthetic Studio, where we turn overlooked materials into inspiring garden experiences. Today's video explores 29 upcycled garden hacks that will breathe new life into your outdoor space this summer. We've included timestamps so you can jump straight to what you need. Have questions or your own ideas? Drop them in the comments. And if this video inspires you, go ahead, make it yours. Use what you have. Reimagine what you thought was waste. You may just see another video, but behind this is a real dream and a small family trying to grow something meaningful. When you subscribe, it's more than a click. It's a piece of hope. And we thank you, truly, for being part of this. One, guitar planter with flowering vines. She found the old guitar buried behind stacks of forgotten things, its strings long gone and its music silenced by time. Once held on warm evenings under fading orange skies, now it stood quiet, but not lifeless. In her hands, the instrument became something new, a vessel not for melody, but for bloom. She carved out its body gently, not to erase its history, but to give it breath again. Painted in soft hues of green and yellow, it shimmered beneath the midday sun, nestled among lavender and foxglove. From the hollow sound hole, morning glories unfurled like notes on a page, climbing up the frets and singing silently in violet and white. Each leaf and petal seemed to hum with memory, rooted not in the past, but in renewal. There, among the bees and rosemary and the rustle of summer air, the guitar found its second voice, quieter, but no less alive. A song of soil and vine, of forgotten things made whole. And now, where music once lived, beauty grows. In the garden's corner, with no need for applause, the old guitar sings again, with every bloom, every breeze, every sunlit hour. Two, upcycled birdcage as a mini fairy garden. It once hung in a forgotten porch corner, its door always shut, its purpose long past. No more birds to sing, no feathers to flutter, just a delicate cage rusting in silence. Until one summer morning, she opened it, not to let anything out, but to let new wonder in. She lined the base with moss and tucked in stones worn smooth by rain. Tiny chairs made of curled bark, an acorn-capped basin, a tea table no larger than a thumbprint, a world reborn, hidden in plain sight. Among the creeping thyme and baby ferns, she placed a single fairy, arms stretched open toward the light. Vines crept gently from the sides, curling around its spine like a forgotten lullaby. At night, it twinkled with warm golden light, like a lantern from a dream. Not grand, but quiet, a pause in the garden. A space for the imagination to rest. It didn't shout beauty. It whispered it, in the curl of a leaf, the shadow of a petal, the stillness of something made with care. From cage to haven, from confinement to magic, it stood now not as a relic, but a reminder. Wonder never really leaves. Sometimes, it just needs a smaller door. Three, toy truck succulent garden for kids' patio area. Once it rumbled across lawns and gravel paths, carrying rocks, sticks, and sometimes forgotten sandwiches. Its wheels were chipped, its paint dulled, its days of adventure nearly done. But under the summer sun, the old truck found new life, not with speed, but with stillness. She filled its yellow bed with soil and tiny roots, tucking in rosettes of blue-green succulents like precious cargo. Each one nestled in carefully, as if the truck had always been meant to carry something delicate. Around them, she placed tiny toy animals, a zebra here, a stegosaurus there, guardians of a pint-sized jungle. Children wandered by and paused, not to race the truck, but to peer inside it, to see the strange little garden blooming from what once rolled in circles on rainy days. And the truck, once loud and fast, now stood quietly, grounded in a corner of joy. It became a conversation between generations, between past play and present beauty. A place where little hands could learn to tend and imagine all at once. In the patio's warm corner, the truck no longer moved, but it grew. A garden not in the ground, but in the memory of motion. Four, old Mug and Teacup Tower for porch corner. They were no longer a set. One handle broken, another cup stained with time. The gold trim faded, the roses on the porcelain barely visible. Yet she couldn't throw them away. There was a kind of grace in their age, in the mismatched charm of stories once poured with tea. So she stacked them, one atop the other, threading them onto an old iron rod like beads in a garden necklace. Soil nestled into each cup, and from those fragile rims, life began again. Tiny blossoms nodded gently in the breeze, trailing vines spilled like lace down the edges. And at the top, a teapot tipped ever so slightly, overflowing with ivy-like steam from memory. The tower stood quietly in the corner of her porch, not asking for attention, but drawing it all the same. Guests would pause, lean in, smile, ask if it was hard to make. She'd just shake her head. It wasn't made, she'd say. It remembered itself. In this new form, the cups didn't need matching plates or perfect patterns. They only needed light, a little water, and the chance to hold something beautiful once more. Five, Rainboot fence decor with mini daisies. They had once stomped through puddles, chased butterflies, and stood by muddy garden beds waiting to be rinsed. Now, lined neatly along the old fence, the Rainboots tell a different story, one not of childhood mischief, but of quiet bloom. Each boot, once scattered in forgotten closets and under stairs, now bursts with color and life. Daisies peek out like tiny sunbursts, snapdragons sway gently in the breeze. Painted anew in colors too bold to ignore, the boots no longer wait for a storm. They bring their own joy, even on the sunniest days. The fence, weathered and gray, has become a canvas, and the boots, its brushstrokes. Visitors smile as they pass. Children reach up to point at their favorite pair. A red one with bumblebees. A yellow one with smiling frogs. Nature giggles from every corner. They say gardens need soil and tools and planning. But sometimes, all they need is something old, something forgotten, and the imagination to see it again. The boots may no longer run, but they still carry laughter. And now, they bloom, right where the sky meets the fence. Six, boots into bloomers. They stood alone by the shed for years, boots that once carried calloused feet through wet grass and gravel paths. Weathered, cracked, silent, until the day she filled them with soil, pressed seeds deep into the toe, and waited. What once stepped through mud now roots in it. Out of the tongue and eyelets, bright blooms burst, defying the shape they were never meant to take. The boots don't seem to mind. Their leather holds the damp like old memories. Their soles cradle the weight of new life. She painted them slowly, with vines and leaves twining across the arches. Soft green lines that seemed to grow even without sun. No longer forgotten, they now rest proudly on stone, standing tall, supporting petals where once they bore steps. Neighbors stop and stare. Some smile. Others pause too long, remembering boots just like them. Full of stories, now full of flowers. In the garden, nothing is wasted. Not time, not age, not boots. And there they bloom, brown and blooming, rough and radiant. A pair of bloomers born not for fashion, but for soil and sky. Seven, color-painted tires for raised flower beds. They were once grimy and forgotten, tires stacked behind the garage, gathering dust and stories of roads long traveled. Too worn to spin, too heavy to toss. Until she rolled them out into the sunlight and gave them purpose again. With brushes dipped in colors of summer, she transformed them, not into wheels, but into frames for flowers. Coral and mint, lemon and lilac, each coat of paint turned them into joy. They no longer waited for a journey, they became destinations. Inside each ring of rubber, life took root. Marigolds laughed in the breeze, sweet alyssums softened the edges, and butterflies claimed them as stepping stones between blooms. One tire read, "Bloom where you're planted." Another simply smiled with daisies. They stacked not just higher, but happier, lifting color into every corner of the garden. The old became sculpture. The discarded became display. People often ask, "What made you think of this?" She just shrugs. "They were already circles," she says. "All I did was let them grow." Eight, drawer planters for layered color displays. They came from different places, one from a desk long broken, another from a dresser that once held baby clothes. Each drawer, chipped and stained, carried its own quiet story. She didn't match them. She stacked them. Imperfectly, intentionally. With a brush in one hand and old pastel paint in the other, she revived their faces, not to hide their age, but to celebrate it. She pulled each drawer open like a mouth ready to sing, and filled them with soil, seed, and light. Now, they bloom in layers. Geraniums spill from the top, soft lobelia tumbles from the sides, nasturtiums trail like songlines between levels. The drawers don't close anymore. They open wider every week, bursting with life. Each morning, she waters them from top to bottom, watching droplets trickle through cracks like rain through history. She kneels, smiles, runs her fingers along the grain of wood now kissed by sunlight and softened by moss. These weren't just drawers. They were keepers of socks, letters, memories. And now, they keep color. Wild, living, reaching color. No longer hidden behind cabinet doors, they stand open, and they bloom. Nine CD sun spinners to deter pests and reflect light. They once held songs, movies, memories, scratched and forgotten at the back of drawers. But when the sun caught one just right, she paused. It flickered. It danced. And suddenly, she knew. Threaded with fishing line and strung from the garden's highest points, the CDS now shimmered in the wind, silent dancers casting rainbows across the leaves. Each spin caught a beam of light and flung it outward, scattering it across marigold petals, tomato vines, and the wings of passing bees. Some were painted, translucent roses and sunbursts arcing across their surface. Others remained untouched, letting light do all the work. Birds kept their distance. So did bugs. But wonder stayed. Children reached for the floating circles like tiny suns. Guests followed the shifting colors as they walked the path. And she stood quietly in the breeze, watching her garden glisten not just with dew, but with light itself. In a world so quick to forget the obsolete, she hung her memories up high, not as relics, but as reflections. And now, each breeze became a melody again, each shimmer a kind of song, played not from speakers, but from sky and sun. Cracked mirror pieces in mosaic garden tiles. The mirror cracked one morning. She could have thrown it away, brushed the pieces into a bin, forgotten its frame and the face it once held. But she gathered each shard gently, like glass petals from a fallen bloom. In the stillness of the garden, she pressed them into cement, not to reflect a perfect image, but to scatter light. With bare hands and pastel powder, she shaped circles from memory and from color. A path began to form, not just across the grass, but through time. Each stone shimmered differently. One caught the lavender's sway. Another mirrored the blue of the sky. As she walked barefoot across them, the glints changed, never still, always alive. The broken edges, once dangerous, were softened now with grout and intention. The garden didn't need perfection. It needed light, even in pieces. And so, the shattered mirror found purpose again. Not to show her who she was, but to show the world what could be made from what had been broken. The reflection no longer lived in one piece, but in many, scattered through the path, whispering, "You can still shine." Old frame as wall-mounted succulent garden. The frame once held portraits, memories brushed in sepia, eyes that never blinked. It hung in a hallway with velvet wallpaper and dust in the corners. When she found it, it was empty, wood chipped, backing gone, the past removed. But what is a frame without something to hold? She pressed soil behind mesh and tucked in tiny roots with fingers smudged in earth. Each succulent was placed like a brushstroke. Thick rosettes here, trailing strings there, colors shifting from green to violet like shadow and light. The garden grew not out, but in, framed like art, living and quiet. Visitors didn't always notice it at first, but then they'd pause, step closer, see the curve of a leaf, the tight spiral of an echeveria, the bloom of a flower where a painting might once have been. It became not just a planter, but a window into calm, a reminder that art isn't always painted, and beauty doesn't always hang in galleries. And now, where once hung faces long forgotten, the frame held something just as full of life. Something that changed, slowly, daily, with sun, with time. Something that breathed. "12. Hanging garden on broken ladder frames." It was too dangerous to climb now. A rung cracked, a hinge loose. The old ladder had served its purpose for years, until it leaned forgotten in the garden's far corner. Most would have thrown it away, but where others saw failure, she saw space. Each rung became a shelf, a platform for bloom. Tin cans and mugs, once rusted and dusty, were repainted and planted. Flowers tumbled over the edges like laughter. Ivy reached upward like it remembered what ladders were made for. She didn't sand away the age. She let the wood speak. Pale blue paint flaked like memory, sunlight caught in every weathered groove. It became a sculpture of imperfection, growing greener with each passing day. The ladder no longer reached rooftops, but it reached the eye, the heart. It stood tall in its stillness, holding not people, but petals. It became her favorite part of the garden, not because it was useful, but because it was willing. Willing to stay, to carry again, even broken. Now, the birds perch on its rungs. The wind leans gently into its frame, and she smiles, knowing that even what can no longer climb can still lift something up. "13. Upcycled headboard as a rose vine trellis." It once stood behind dreams, a quiet frame holding sleep and story. But the mattress is gone, the bedroom long changed, and the headboard sat in the shed, its curves collecting dust and time. She saw not a relic, but a canvas. And in her garden, it rose again, not to cradle a sleeper, but to support something alive. She painted it gently, letting the metal remember its softness. Then she planted a rose at its feet and waited. The vine was slow at first, cautious, but soon it reached upward, threading itself through iron curls like fingers through hair. As the roses opened, delicate pink and blushing coral, the frame came back to life. Not in a room, but under sky. Not behind pillows, but beside bees. The trellis stood with quiet grace, both structure and story. A thing once meant for rest, now made for growth. Each thorn and bloom along its spine told a tale of resilience, that beauty doesn't vanish when purpose shifts. Now it holds no dreams, yet it inspires them. In a bed of soil instead of sheets, it still lifts something beautiful. And when the wind moves the roses just right, it almost breathes. "14. Shabby chic pallet wall planter. It once held crates in a warehouse, unnoticed and splintered, built for lifting, not for beauty. But beneath the worn wood, she saw possibility. A wall not for separation, but for life. She brushed each slat with softened colors, a whisper of white here, a breath of green there, not to hide its age, but to give it voice. Then she planted rows of herbs and flowers, tucked gently into each level, spilling down like ribbons in the wind. The palette became a wall of flavor and bloom. Basil brushed against oregano, lobelia fell like waterfalls of blue, and nasturtiums danced in sunlight. The air around it filled with scent and color, useful, edible, alive. She added hooks for her tools, signs for her plants, a bench nearby for morning tea. What once moved heavy goods now grew delicate ones. What once stood empty now overflowed. The garden didn't grow in rows that season. It grew in layers. And every time she ran her fingers through the thyme or leaned in to water a pot, she was reminded, even things made for burden can hold beauty. "15. Vintage kettles for hanging herbs. They once whistled in kitchens filled with morning light, their bellies warming over flame, pouring stories into chipped cups. But now they hang in the garden, silent, yet no less full. Suspended from rope, their handles sway gently in the breeze. Some still shine with enamel, others wear rust like lace. Inside, mint and rosemary grow tall, bursting from spouts and open lids, reaching toward the sun that now steeps them instead of tea. She never meant to collect them. One kettle was her grandmother's. Another came from a thrift store shelf. But when she saw the way thyme draped over the side like steam, she smiled. The collection began. Now the air around them hums with scent, citrus and pine, pepper and sweetness. The kettles don't boil anymore. They bloom. There's something lovely in their stillness, in their second purpose. They don't serve tea, but they serve joy, to bees, to herbs, to anyone who wanders close enough to notice. And in the softest moments, when the wind stirs the rope and the chives sway ever so slightly, she swears they almost sing again. Not from their spouts, but from their roots. "16. Bamboo curtain resurrected as vertical herb rack. It once rustled softly in doorways, announcing every entrance and exit with a gentle wooden click. A bamboo curtain, functional, simple, mostly forgotten, until she stretched it across the garden wall and gave it something new to hold. She tied little vessels to its ribs, repainted tins, old mugs, stitched canvas pockets, each filled with soil and scent. Herbs sprang forth like tiny green flags, basil's sweet fullness, thyme's woody calm, dill's feathery joy. The curtain no longer swayed in thresholds. It stood still, blooming. Sunlight slipped between its slats, drawing lines across leaves. Bees paused, then moved on. And each morning, She ran her fingers across the plants like a pianist, brushing the fragrance into the air. There was rhythm again in that old bamboo, but not from footsteps. From leaves rustling, from water trickling, from life growing vertically where only air once moved. The herb rack needed no fanfare. It just stood there, humble, useful, unexpectedly lovely. Proof that the most ordinary things, when hung with care, can become walls of abundance. And in this garden, where doors no longer creak and curtains no longer part, the bamboo still welcomes, with leaves, with scent, with silence. "17. DIY vertical window garden with plastic bottles." They were headed for the recycling bin. Crinkled bottles, scuffed labels, empty reminders of what once quenched. But she saw space in their curves. Space for roots. Space for light. With careful hands, she sliced them open, washed them clean, and strung them into a garden that climbed instead of spread. Bottle by bottle, life took shape along the window, a wall of edible green catching the sun, glowing softly like glass lanterns filled with growth. Lettuce curled in gentle waves. Spinach stood proud, its veins like rivers. And below each bottle, drops of water gathered and fell like breath exhaled by the earth itself. This wasn't about saving space, though it did. It wasn't even about saving plastic, though she did that too. It was about turning what was empty into what could nourish. About letting the light in from behind and the roots stretch forward in spite of walls. Her window no longer just showed the garden. It became one. And each time she opened it, scent and green and sunlight met her like an invitation, not to admire, but to grow. "18. Ice cream tubs painted pastel for balcony plants." The tubs once held sweetness, scoops of summer joy, shared under fans and fading sunsets. Now, they cradle something slower, something that grows. She washed them clean, scrubbed away the stickiness of the past, and gave each one a coat of pastel calm. Yellow for warmth, mint for stillness, lavender for hope. Then, she planted, not too much, just enough for scent and color and flavor to rise gently in the city breeze. On the small balcony where space once felt scarce, a new rhythm began. Basil brushed her arm when she leaned toward the railing. Cherry tomatoes blushed red in the morning sun. And violas, tiny, bright, quietly confident, smiled from plastic that had known another kind of delight. Neighbors began to ask, "Where did you buy those little pots?" She'd just laugh. "From the freezer," she'd say. But what she really meant was, from memory, from reuse, from imagination. The tubs no longer melted away. They held. They bloomed. They taught her that even the most disposable things, given care, given color, could root themselves in joy again. "19. Rust-free metal buckets turned lavender pots." They were once forgotten at the edge of a shed, dull with dust and lined with rust. But after a careful polish, a little sealant, and a gentle brush of paint, the old buckets found themselves gleaming again, not for water, but for scent. She filled them with soil and dreams, then pressed in lavender by the handful. It grew quickly under the summer sun, rising above the rims in waves of soft purple and silver green. The scent drifted easily through the garden, calming every corner it touched. Each bucket stood proud and simple, holding not just roots, but rhythm. The bees came first, then butterflies, then quiet conversations beside the path. Some buckets bore tiny messages: breathe, grow slow, stay wild, scrawled in faded paint. Others were wrapped with twine, like little gifts from the earth. And as she walked the path each evening, brushing her fingertips across the blooms, she smiled. These weren't just containers. They were reminders that even what's dented can be useful. Even what's plain can carry beauty. That in a garden, everything and everyone deserves a second bloom. Repainted garden tools as decor stakes. They had dug deep, turned soil, cleared weeds, long before their handles splintered and their blades dulled. Most would have tossed them aside, but she looked at the rust and saw roots. Roots for something new. She sanded the wood smooth, let bright colors bloom across each handle, and sealed the steel with care. The spade became a sunflower. The rake, a row of painted daisies. The trowel wore vines that curled like laughter. And in the garden, they rose, not to work, but to watch. Planted like flags between flowers, the tools now marked spaces of intention. Beside calendula and alyssum, they stood tall and still, holding small signs that whispered, bloom brave and grow anyway. Visitors assumed they were art, but to her, they were more. They were tribute, to hands that worked, to soil that changed, to the grace of rest after purpose. The garden didn't need them anymore, but it welcomed them, reborn, upright, radiant. And every time she passed them, the sunlight catching on a painted petal or polished blade, she was reminded that even the tools that no longer dig can still plant something beautiful. Basket lampshades as hanging fern holders. They once hung from ceilings, warm with light, casting patterns onto kitchen walls and quiet dining rooms. But the bulbs burned out, the fixtures changed, and the baskets were left behind, woven but forgotten. She turned them upside down, emptied the dust, and gave them to the ferns. Now, they dangle from the beams like forest bells, heavy with green. Fronds spill from their centers, soft as breath, brushing the air with every breeze. The light that once lived inside them has shifted, no longer electric, but sunlit, filtered through trees and morning stillness. Each one holds a different rhythm. The maidenhair flutters delicately. The Boston fern pours down like silk. And the baskets, unchanged in form, yet utterly transformed, cradle it all in their gentle frame. It's quiet here, beneath them. Just the creak of rope, the whisper of leaves, and the scent of soil from nearby pots. A hanging chorus of reuse, of balance, of things turned back to nature. She doesn't miss the light they once held, because now they hold something softer, something rooted, something real. Spoon wind chimes with floral beads. They were once part of dinners long past. Spoons stirring tea, forks tapping on plates, knives gliding through soft butter. Their handles held fingerprints, their edges worn by memory. She flattened them gently, not to erase their story, but to let them sing a new one. Strung from driftwood, each utensil clinked in quiet harmony, joined by strings of glass beads shaped like blossoms and raindrops. When the wind came, it wasn't loud, just a soft, silvery conversation between metal and light. Hung in a shaded corner of the garden, they chimed over petals and poems, sometimes ringing against ivy, sometimes whispering to butterflies. They didn't need attention. They only needed air. Visitors asked if they were bought. She only smiled, because how could they know that the spoon once belonged to her mother, or the bead came from a necklace long broken, that each sound was stitched from 1,000 unspoken afternoons. Now, when the wind passes through, it carries more than just breath. It carries music, not from an instrument, but from what was left behind, reshaped, rearranged, and rehung with care. And in their song, she hears everything that came before, and everything still yet to bloom. "23. Torn curtain turned into soft hanging pots." The curtain once framed light, swaying in quiet rooms, filtering morning sun, catching the wind like breath. But time had torn it in places, and she could no longer hang it in the window. So, she let it hang in the garden instead. She cut and folded the fabric into soft cradles, stitched by hand, uneven but strong. Each pouch she filled with earth and memory, tucking in roots like lullabies. The cloth held more than weight, it held warmth. Hung from old beams, they moved gently in the wind, carrying time and sweet peas instead of dust and silence. Some frayed at the edges, but the plants didn't mind. They grew anyway, soft green tendrils curling from the seams, little blossoms blooming like secrets in an apron pocket. Visitors often missed them at first, but when they noticed, really noticed, they leaned in, ran their fingers along the fabric, felt the softness, saw the life, and they smiled, because not everything must stay where it started. Some things, even torn, are meant to hold beauty. And now the curtain, once drawn across a window, opens into a garden. One stitch, one root, one breath at a time. "24. Worn-out kitchen graters as herb holders." They once sat inside drawers, shredding cheese and zesting lemons. Their edges dulled, their handles chipped, their usefulness questioned. No longer sharp, but not yet finished. She held one in her hand and thought, "You can still hold something." So she painted them softly, lined them with soil, and gave them back a purpose. Not to cut, but to cradle. Now they hang in a tidy row, speckled in sunlight, with herbs spilling gently from their sides. Mint dances in the wind, parsley grows in dense curls, and oregano trails like forgotten threads. Each grater hums with quiet redemption, aged metal, now humming with green. The garden speaks in these little contradictions. That tools meant to slice can now support. That things dulled with time still have flavor to offer. And as guests pass by the fence, their eyes pause, puzzled, amused, then charmed. Because there is poetry in utility, and even more in reinvention. The graters no longer scrape. They soften, they bloom, and in every leaf that grows where once a blade moved, there's a kind of peace. The peace of knowing that even the most unlikely vessel can still grow something beautiful. (25) Rotating hanging plants on hanger sculpture. They hung in closets once, bowed beneath the weight of coats and time. Simple wire, shaped for shoulders, forgotten in the corners of storage rooms. But in her hands, the hangers took flight. She bent them, looped them, balanced them like branches reaching into air. And from their hooks, she suspended life, glass jars, small pots, spilling over with vines and trailing green. The sculpture turned slowly in the breeze, not spinning, but swaying, like a mobile built from stillness. Each plant moved with grace, leaves brushing air, light slipping through in fractured green. It didn't chime, it didn't glow, but it danced. Neighbors stood beneath it, faces upturned. Children reached for its edges, watching ivy swing like playful arms. It wasn't just a garden feature. It was a moment, a reminder that motion can be soft, that balance can be beautiful, that even the humblest shapes, bent wire, clear jars, reused rope, can rise, hold life, and move with the wind. And there, beneath the turning leaves and shifting shadows, she watched something once static become something living, suspended not in time, but in possibility. (26) Plastic cap mosaic for garden signage. She used to toss them without thought, those little caps from water bottles, milk jugs, and juice cartons. Small, forgettable, disposable. But then she began collecting them, sorting them by color, lining them up like confetti waiting for a purpose. One rainy afternoon, the mosaic began. A board, some glue, a vision. Letter by letter, the sign came to life. Not painted, but pieced together, each cap a voice, each color a note. Grow wild, it read. And it did. Now it greets every garden guest in a chorus of color. Reds pulse like poppies, greens like leaves in sunlight, blues like sky behind a blooming trellis. Children trace the curves of the letters. Bees buzz near the edges. It doesn't just sit. It sings. The caps don't match. They don't need to. Together, they form something whole, a welcome, a message, a mural of what it means to reuse with joy. She made the sign for herself, but it speaks to everyone. That beauty doesn't need polish, only presence. And that even the smallest discarded things, when gathered with care, can bloom into something bright enough to lead the way. (27) Colorful painted rake head for hanging tools or lights. Its handle was cracked, its days of raking long gone. Once used to gather leaves, now discarded beneath the shed. But she picked it up, saw the curve in its spine, the rhythm in its teeth. Not an ending, a frame. She brushed off the rust, dipped her brush in coral and teal, added tiny petals across the top like confetti. Then she flipped it upside down, mounted it on the garden fence, and gave it purpose again, not to pull, but to hold. From each tine, something dangled. A coil of jute, a hand trowel with a worn wooden grip, a tiny pot filled with thyme, a lantern waiting for dusk. It became a bouquet of function and flair, blooming with objects instead of petals. Visitors looked twice. Some asked where she bought it. She'd only smile and say, "I didn't buy it. I noticed it." Now, every time she reaches for the twine, or lights the lantern, or simply walks by, she's reminded that even the most ordinary tools, when given color and care, can become part of the story. And the rake, once buried in autumn leaves, now catches light and holds beauty. '28. Painted fan blades as petal art along garden border. The fan no longer turned. Its motor silent, its blades dusty and still. Most would have tossed it to the curb, chalked it up as junk. But when she laid those blades on the grass, something unexpected appeared, the shape of a bloom. She painted each one like petals, bold and unapologetic. No pastels here, only fire and sky, sun and berry. Each blade curved gently into the next, forming flowers that could never wilt, never fade. Not made to mimic nature, but to dance beside it. Staked into the soil, they rose among coneflowers and zinnias, drawing the eye like garden confetti. Some bore mosaic mirrors at the center, catching bits of sky. Others held bottle cap hearts painted like sunshine. Children pointed and ran toward them. Grown-ups knelt for photos. And in the middle of a blooming border, the blades once made to stir air now stirred joy. They weren't delicate, but they were radiant. Proof that beauty doesn't always have to be soft. Sometimes it's bold. Sometimes it's salvaged. And sometimes it's found in the most surprising shapes, like a flower made from something that used to spin, now standing still and still stealing the show. '29. Rusty metal baskets transformed with bright paint and blooming petunias. They were rusted through when she found them, their curves orange with age, their wires bent and brittle. But beneath the corrosion, there was form, shape, possibility. With a wire brush and bold paint, she gave them back their color, not just silver or black, but sky blue, cherry red, and sunburst yellow. Each basket became a cradle again, but this time not for laundry or fruit, for flowers. She lined them with burlap, filled them with soil, and tucked in petunias like confetti. Magenta spilled over the edges, white blossoms trumpeted skyward, purple stripes curled in the breeze. And when the wind moved, the baskets danced. Hung from hooks and pergolas, they became part of the garden's rhythm. Not delicate, but full. Not new, but alive. Neighbors didn't recognize them at first. "Where did you find those planters?" they asked. She only smiled. "At the end of their life," she'd say, "and the start of mine." Now, the rust is gone, but the history remains. Each petal grows from a place that was once forgotten, and every sway of those baskets reminds her that color, like purpose, can always return. If this video meant something to you, please know that subscribing means the world to me. You're not just supporting content, you're supporting a dream that keeps my family going. Thank you, Truly. I'd also love to hear from you. What did you enjoy the most? Is there anything I could do better to keep inspiring or simply entertaining you? Your feedback helps this channel grow with heart and purpose. Let me know in the comments. I read every one.